In this video, I'm testing the battery of all of these phones. With the brightness lock at 200 nits, all connected to the same Wi-Fi, no sound or vibration, and all batteries at 100% health. I started this battery test by closing all background apps, and right before kicking things off, the Galaxy was already at 99%. During the first hour, I ran TikTok videos since it's a light app that most people use. At a 30-minute mark, only the iPhone Air and the Pro Max were still at 100%, while the rest had already dropped to 98%. But after 45 minutes, the Air finally dipped to 99%, while the Pro remained untouched. An hour in, and we switched to Instagram to watch videos for another hour. It may sound repetitive, but this mirrors real-world usage. At 1 hour and 20 minutes, the iPhone 17 Pro Max finally dropped to 99%, but as time passed, it kept dipping more noticeably, and by the 2-hour mark, this was the result. For the third test, finding a game compatible with all the phones wasn't easy, but I ended up going with this one. And hey, if you have any suggestions for future videos, well, just drop them in the comments. I ran it for 30 minutes and I saw the biggest drop on the iPhone Air, which lost 10% while the Pro Max was still holding strong in the 90s. Now we're stepping things up with a web simulation of 10,000 fish using WebGL benchmark, more demanding and also heavier on the battery. Notice how the Pixel's phones, due to their Tensor processor, are the only ones not maintaining a steady 60 frames per second, but also how all the phones lost a ton of battery in just 30 minutes. But anyway, let's continue with one of the most popular benchmarks ever, Antutu. It doesn't run too long, so after 15 minutes, we jumped into something more graphically demanding, 3D Mark's Steel's Nomad. I would have used Solar Bay, but the Tensor chips aren't compatible with this, so we're stuck with this one. Meanwhile, I decided to record with a thermal camera to monitor temperatures, and to my surprise, the weaker phones were actually the hottest ones, while the two most powerful chips stayed the coolest. The benchmark finished with these results, and you can clearly see the throttling on the iPhone Air, which was way worse than the iPhone 17. At this point, I wanted to slow down a little bit, and I started playing a 4K YouTube video. My first choice wasn't the best, so I swapped it for something a bit more dynamic, and I let it play for 1 hour and 20 minutes. Still, power drain wasn't as high as previous tests, though most phones were already around 50% battery. So now let's test the cameras. First, we used the front camera recording in 4K 30 frames per second for about 16 minutes. Then, we switched to the rear camera and kept recording in the same resolution. It's interesting how all the phones lost between 8 and 11% battery, while the Pro Max only dropped by 6%. Next up is Twitch, where I let the live stream playing with the chat running below because when set to full screen, the iPhones don't fully stretch the video. So, in the end, the results were also predictable but consistent. At the same time, we kept the stream going while opening Twitter, leaving it on the news page that also plays a looping video. And look, we're now hitting 6 hours and a half on screen time, and all of these phones are still alive, which it's quite impressive, especially for the iPhone Air. We have gone through all the apps on my list, so I wanted to speed things up a bit by rerunning 3D Mark. After 23 minutes, the results were almost the same, but both iPhones were the first to drop below 20%. I then also ran the fish benchmark again, but this time with 30,000 fish. And check this out. At first, the Air and the Pro were around 30 frames per second, but over time, the Air tanked, eventually being worse than the iPhone 17. Exactly what we also saw with 3D Mark. 35 minutes later, I went back to TikTok to see which two iPhones will die first, and at 7 hours and 51 minutes, the iPhone 17 was the first one down. All the other phones lasted at least 8 hours of use, which is impressive, but just as I opened a video on Instagram, the iPhone Air shut off exactly at the 8-hour mark. At this point, the final ranking was obvious, so let me speed up the rest of the test. The Pixel 10 died at 9 hours and 33 minutes, and the XL just 2 minutes later, with the final showdown between the iPhone 17 Pro Max and the Galaxy S25 Ultra. The Galaxy put up a good fight, but as I was watching this rooster get a haircut, it dropped while the iPhone still had 10% left. I threw a few more benchmarks at it, and the 17 Pro Max finally shut off at 10 hours and 51 minutes. The iPhone 17 was the first to die, even though it had a slightly bigger battery than the iPhone Air, which, I mean, it just shows you how the A19 Pro is way more efficient. Then we have the Pixel 10, which with nearly 5000 mAh battery had a big advantage, while the 10 Pro XL with the larger screen, well, that made it less efficient. The Galaxy S25 Ultra with a smaller battery still lasted nearly an hour longer than the Pixel, and the clear winner, well, the iPhone 17 Pro Max. This is the first time we do a video like this, so any feedback of what we can improve and other tests that we can do, you can leave it in the comments. I see you in the next one. Ciao, ciao.